Since we got done with planting last night, I slept like a stinking rock. Today we have beautiful weather. They're talking like 85 degrees. So grab your hats, ladies and gentlemen, because we got a lot of stuff to get done today. I'm not trying to complain, but I'm gonna complain a little bit. Notice how our Kentucky bluegrass really nice right here, nice and thick. But what happened over there, and what happened down there, and what happened over there? Ugh. Once we get done with planting season, it's like the time where you sit and look at all the things you've wanted to do all winter, but you couldn't because the ground's been frozen, and then all the stuff you wanted to do all spring, but you couldn't because you had to get in the field planting. So now that we're done planting, we have all these things that we want to do, but the problem is we have things we have to get done first. So right now I'm gonna hop in the red truck. Planted all of our corn in 3 rounds this year. We kind of had an early round, then we got rain, and then we had another round, then we got rain, then we had another round, then we got rain. So all of our fields are kind of coming out of the ground at different times. First round stuff already out of the ground. We're gonna go check on second round because it should just be coming up. First field of the morning is Tabletop. We commonly refer to Tabletop on our operation because it's our favorite farm, and it also just so happens to be our best farm. In Iowa, ground is ranked off a corn suitability rating scale, or a CSR scale. Tabletop comes in at a 98 out of 100. With calcium magnesium ratios near balanced and over a 5% organic matter level, Tabletop is hands down our most productive farm on paper. The problem with being a 98 CSR is this farm is as flat as can be, hence why we call it Tabletop. And the problem with being flat is when we get a bunch of water on it, that water has absolutely nowhere to run off to. So we need some field tile on this farm. Right now, the east half of it has field tile, and as we can see reflective on the yield map, you can almost see right where the tile ends. The west side yields quite a bit less, and the northwest side yields a lot less. So we got stuff just starting to kind of come out of the ground here. About an inch and a half tall. Looking really good, actually. This is a field where I have a test going on. So this front side of the field is just how we normally do soybeans. Then the back side of the field, we are trying a biological on the seed. So I'm gonna do some digs up front and do some digs up back. And we'll just kind of compare our initial baby soybean roots. We have a machete, a big file, and some sickles from the bean head. File it is. Oh man, that one's in there good. That's kind of what we got there going on. I'm happy with how that's looking. I think these soybeans came out of the ground at just the right time. Notice how we still have a couple still kind of just poking their heads through, but we're definitely starting to develop a little bit of a crust right here. Now it's not terrible, but it's getting harder. It's really kind of amazing the power of these little plants. Look how it just lifted that entire crust right off the ground. That's a big chunk too, and there's even a bigger one right there. Look at that. Just pushes it right up. And look at the soil structure. How it just like clumps up together. That's worm poop right there. That is very fascinating. Oh wow, look at that. You can even see a worm hole right there. It shines all the way through. These are the non-biological treated soybeans. These do have a full seed treatment on them otherwise, so the best seed treatment we could buy. But what I'm looking at is this main stem, and then it comes down into the roots. That main root that comes off the stem, that one that goes straight down, that is the tap root. I want to make sure that's going straight down, not down and then to the side, or just straight to the side, because that would show we have a hard layer in the soil that that root cannot go through. This soil definitely does feel more firm. This is starting to develop into really a true no-till field. And so, I mean, we can definitely see it with all these wormholes. Look at that. They're just eating right through this. You can see a whole bunch here in the top as well. So those are really good because they go deep into the soil. So when you get rain and you have soil that has nice solid soil structure like this, then that water just finds those wormholes. And it's like a drain. It goes way down into the soil profile. No-till is one of those things that kind of takes a couple years for your soil to get into the structure of it, because when we come in and do tillage, we basically turn it to this. We just break it up, so it loses all that tying togetherness, where now that we've been in it for a few years, it seems like we're starting to see maybe a little bit more of this, in this farm in particular. And so I think that's just a sign that we're converting And we should start being able to reap more of the no-till benefits because of that. So these are the non-treated, these are the treated. The only differences I'm really seeing, I think some of these, like this guy, he has a whole bunch of little hairs and stuff, but the big difference is, look at the difference of the thickness of the hairs. So I think that could be something. We're just gonna keep an eye on it, keep doing digs as they start growing and getting bigger and seeing if we keep seeing a difference. But right here, yeah, I would say that's pretty noticeable in the different thicknesses of those hairs. Looking at this corn, this was planted on the second wave. It's just about ready to come up to the surface. I wouldn't be surprised maybe later this afternoon. I can tell you one thing, I'm not really liking how those roots are growing. They're growing right parallel to the furrow that was created for it. They're not growing down. There's also quite the size difference among all the corn we have in the ground so far. We got stuff that's not out of the ground yet, and we have stuff that's this tall. We are getting a really bad crust over on this particular farm, or in this area. Like, this is hard as a rock. I don't think we're gonna have very good luck with much more coming through. We're missing a plant right here. We're missing a plant right there. We are missing a plant right there, plant there, and a plant right there. Due to this big old crust. Look at this. I'm gonna bending my thing. So I bet if we dug down in a couple of these gap spots, we'll find a seed that just died. Yep, right there. You can see it. It just grew right up into the crust, and then it's kind of running out of horsepower now. It got kind of trapped. I'm really surprised it didn't make it to that crack yet. The good news about having our corn planting spread over the course of 3 different periods is the first period has the crust battle to deal with. The second and the third periods have not had that because we haven't had a big rain on them yet. So hopefully the other 2/3 of the corn that we have planted doesn't have this crusting issue and everything comes up. But for the first 300 acres that we have planted is what it is. I've got the emergence test results from the high-speed study. So we did an 8-mile-an-hour pass, that's what we just saw, a 6-mile-an-hour pass, and a 3.4-mile-an-hour pass. We did a down, back, down of each. Now this is just emergence coming out of the ground. We're gonna be taking these to yield too, so then we'll really be able to find out. But as far as emergence goes, these were our results. We'll start with the 3.4-mile-an-hour. We had 24 out of the ground right away. Then we came back 12 hours later. We had 5 more. And then we had to come back 2 days after that. And then we had 1 straggler. On the 6-mile-an-hour, we had 22 out of the ground right away. Came back 12 hours later. We found 9 more. And then 2 days later, we had 1 straggler. And then with the 8-mile-an-hour, we had 16 out of the ground right away. Came back 12 hours later. There was 12 more. And then 2 days later, we had 7 stragglers. Now here's the $1,000,000 question. Does this mean that the 8 mile per hour is not going to yield as good as the 3.4 mile an hour? And not necessarily. All the research that I've done on our farm has concluded that the longer the gap it takes from the first emergers to the last emergers, like the more stragglers we have, the worse the yield is going to be. Out of all the research that I've done, that has also been the case, but sometimes research does not necessarily line up with reality. So we are going to be taking this to yield for that reason. So it's too early for us to determine right now, but from an emergence perspective, we definitely have a difference. And what I find really interesting is out of all the high-speed studies that I have found, whatever speed ranges they say can go anywhere from 3 to 12 miles an hour, all their yields have been the exact same on the studies that I've seen from the companies who are selling these speed kits. So it's going to be really interesting to see on our farm how that actually applies. Now we also have to keep in mind, we had Yetter Twister poly closing wheels on there. On our white planter, we have Yetter Twister cast closing wheels. I had them all the way cranked down on the deer, but I think the problem in emergence was rising with the fact that the closing wheels were just bouncing around so bad because we couldn't get enough weight on them. If we had a cast closing wheel, in the no-till conditions that we were in, so we're not in any worked up soil at all. I also think we would have had a different result had that been the case too. But in these no-till conditions with a poly wheel, so a plastic closing wheel system, we just could not get enough pressure down on those closing wheels to really knit that furrow together like we needed it to be, and to get it firmed around the seed like we would have liked. If we would have had a 2-stage closing system, then I think our result could have been different on this, and we would have had a lot closer emergence coming out of the ground. But I think those are really the reasons why. I think the planter was keeping everything down in the ground just like it needed to, and I think the singulation was right where it needed to be, and based off the emergence that I've seen, it was right where it needed to be. Our problem was just with having an incorrect closing wheel system for that particular application in the conditions we had on our farm with the soils that we have. See how the new waterways are coming in. Oh yeah, we got grass. We got grass growing. Yeah, look at that. It's growing. The first field of phase 2 planting. $17.5 feet. All right, Ellie, how many are we gonna find? How many are we gonna find?
Find all of them. Hopefully we find all of them.
Just a little baby guy right there just poking his head out. Cooper planted this field. I noticed a couple things. This is kind of the importance of getting out and looking behind the planter to seeing what's going on, and as you're planting, paying attention to what's going on. This was beans last year. Our old bean row is right here. And so our old corn row from the year before was right here, because last year when we planted beans, we just shifted over 15 inches. Well, this year, Cooper shifted back over 15 inches. Look at this. We are right on top of the old root balls that were here. So see how we kind of slice some of these roots off and stuff? Well, there's spots where we're running right over the top of the entire root ball. So either we're planting a seed down kind of inside of this mass of roots that used to be there, or the row unit is kind of bouncing up over the top of these because these are solid. So as a planter operator, we need to be cognizant. Is that the word I'm looking for? We need to be aware of that old root ball. Another thing I'm noticing is when we planted this, it was just after it got done raining. A couple days had went by, and they were talking more rain for a few days coming. So we're like, ah man, we need to get out there and get going, because otherwise, you know, we're not gonna have that little window to plant. So see how we kind of have a little cliff right here? That's a straight wall. That's from the disc opener, and then the closing wheel closed everything up. But after doing just a little bit of digging here, when we get kind of through that top little crust, we can keep digging down and just following that straight little cliffed wall. Oh, hey, we got a corn right there. He's coming up. Ooh, it won't be long for him. But what I'm getting at right there is where the old furrow was. You can see it right to a T. It did not get zipped shut with the closing wheels the way it should have. We can just stick this wire down that deep before it hits anything, because it's wide open. It didn't get sealed shut. So if we have a seed down in the bottom of that, it's exposed to air, elements, and everything else. Most importantly, that seed dried out, or the soil around that seed dried out, so he's probably not going to emerge at the same rate as one that was fully encapsulated in soil. This comes down to, you can have the best technology in the world on your planter, but if you're not getting out and actually assessing the conditions with your eyes and your hands, and then inputting that data back into the technology that we have, it doesn't do us any good, because that's the whole point of the technology being there. Instead of having to get the wrenches out and all the sprockets and chains and, you know, the heavy hardware and take 4 hours to do one setting difference, now we can just get in the cab and press the buttons. But if we don't get out to find the information on what buttons we need to change within the cab, it doesn't do us any good. So that's kind of what we have going on here. We really needed to tighten our closing wheel system down a notch, probably, because this furrow just didn't seal up. So I would be willing to bet there's some seed to soil contact issues in some of these areas and some open furrows. I noticed when I was walking back there, I saw a few. We don't always have perfect conditions to plant into, so the idea behind all the tech that we put on is to be able to have as much in control on getting marginal conditions as good as possible through the settings that we're able to set. We probably should have done a little bit better job of getting out and looking to make sure everything was set, not just assume it was the same as what it was before we had that little rain. And honestly, I could be right here in the field, and then I could go on the other side of the house in the same field, and we could have different conditions. I could be here, I could go right across the creek to the Bush farm or the Hanson farm, and we have completely different soil conditions. I'm not trying to dog Cooper because he's learning here. I'm learning, Dad's learning, we're all learning. But I think when we're running the planter, we really need to have a crew behind the planter as we pull into a new field, just to test it to make sure that things are running how they were and how we had it set in the field before. Because this, I'd give this an 80%. We'll see how our emergence test comes out. There's no award in farming for being the first one done. There's no award for doing things quickly. There's an award for doing things right, which is what we're really trying to do. I think the planter guy needs to be extremely anal retentive and have a zero tolerance for anything being wrong, because I mean that's truly our one opportunity to put the seed into the ground correct. Start the foundation of the house at a good point. You know, and all the weeds and stuff where Uncle Erland's here, it looked like it was way bigger. Ron's out there pushing his dozer right now, getting stuff kind of piled up. Well, that's not going to be bad to clean up at all. I got an update on the intercrop plot. It's really cool. So right here we have what's called monocrop corn, which is just all corn, and then we have monocrop soybeans, which is all soybeans. Then over there, we got both together. That's called intercropping. You can see where the deer have been out here doing a little bit of munching. First off, I'm gonna show all the different trials in the plot, and once we get done with that, then I'll explain all the reasonings behind everything. So right here we got 12 rows or 30 feet of soybeans, and then we have right next to it 12 rows or 30 feet of corn. And then this strip is 8 rows of soybeans next to 8 rows of corn, 4 rows of soybeans next to 4 rows of corn. We're not gonna talk about what went on up there. 3 rows of soybean next to 3 rows of corn. And as it continues on, we got 2 rows of soybeans, 2 rows of corn, 1 row of soybean, 1 row of corn. Everything is replicated twice, so that way we're gonna get some good testing. So we got a down back of each. Now, the intercrop plot. It kind of seems like a ginormous pain. How are we supposed to harvest it, first of all? We have a 45-foot wide bean head, 30 feet beans, 20 foot, 15s, 10s, 7.5s. How are we supposed to get in there? Well, we're gonna have to harvest corn first, and then we'll have to come back in and then do the beans. So that could be a struggle. We're gonna have to have the right chemistry to spray on it, so that way we don't kill the corn or the beans, because we have to spray at the same time. We can't really just shut off the nozzles where the one exact crop is without any drift over onto the other. And fertilizing it could be a problem. We've already run into an issue with nitrogen. We had to put nitrogen on the whole thing, so we're probably gonna have lazy soybeans that are not going to fixate their own nitrogen, or as much of nitrogen as they should, because they already have a shot of 32% on them right now. But the idea behind what we're trying to do is, you know when you're driving down the road during the summertime and you see corn out in the field and you're looking at right from the road, it just looks absolutely beautiful on the edge. Sometimes you see 3, 4, 5 years, you know, on a plant, and then you get out, you walk up to those, you pull them back. They're just, every single one of them's a monster, filled all the way right to the tip. Then you go inside the field just a few rows and you start pulling them back, and you're like, these are half the size, what's going on? Well, that's because you have more access to resources, you have more access to sunlight, and plants love sunlight. So basically what we're doing here, we're just trying to make the edge of the field as much as we possibly can. I don't know if it's gonna work or not. I found some studies that say it works and that it's actually fairly profitable doing it, really profitable doing it. So I figured, what the who? We're never gonna know unless we try it on our farm. So right behind the house, we have to look out at it, right out the window every single day, every time I turn around to my office desk to remind me of the potential pain of harvesting that might be.